Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Yellow Gloves podcast. Today we're going to be breaking down Cage Warriors 161, which took place last night in Dublin. Paul Hughes versus Yann Liasse in the main event. We're going to look at Mason Jones's fight. Mason's back again in 2023 in Cage Warriors, and he's put on another great show. Leon Hill versus Ieuan Davies was insane for as long as it lasted. Paddy McCorry, Samir Kadhi, any fight on this card, every fight on this card. We're going to be talking about it as we always do. But we got to start at the main event with Paul Hughes versus Yann Liasse. So what a main event that was, huh? Like, I'll kind of try and set this up in the best way that I possibly can. Like, I think both of these guys had so much to lose with the booking of this fight. Because anyone who listens to the pod, anyone who follows me on socials will know I'm a huge Yann Liasse fan. I think this guy is must-watch MMA. Incredibly violent finisher, smart fighter, a dangerous wherever the fight takes him. And Paul Hughes, again, anyone who listens to this will know. I mean, I gave this guy Performance of the Year last year in the Yellow Glove Awards show. And, you know, for his fight with Jordan Vucenic, of course. And I think the world of him. And I think both guys had so much to lose taking this one because for Yann, he's on the cusp of a title shot. And it's a title shot that not a lot of people can deny him. And this fight was not a title match. So whenever you have one of those when you might be the next in line, when you have a fight that isn't for the title and you're there or thereabouts, it can take a toll and it can kind of derail that run, right? And then for Paul Hughes, people will think, well, you know, how's this a risk for him? How is he taking a risk here? And you just got to think of it logistically, right? Like, Paul Hughes should have been in the UFC like a year and a half ago, and he's not. And this fight was not at featherweight, so Paul Hughes was not defending his title. Paul Hughes was moving up a weight class, relinquishing his belt at 145 pounds. A loss here would have been disastrous for him, and disaster it was not for Paul Hughes because all it took was a round. And we saw exactly why Paul Hughes is one of the best prospects in MMA in general. Forget Ireland, forget Europe, forget anything, right? Like, this guy is... The fact he's not signed to the UFC, to me, is as ludicrous as the fact that Hardwick wasn't. And Hardwick had to go through the Contender Series. And I'm not going to beat that horse to death because we've done it before on the pod. And Hardwick had to go through Contender Series and then inevitably lost because Contender Series is fucking cursed when it comes to your favourite fighters going on there. Hardwick should have had a path straight in. And honestly, I will lose my mind. If Paul Hughes has to go through Contender Series, it will be absolutely ludicrous. This guy should be on the next Paris card. This guy should be on the next London card. Whenever UFC have a Europe thing, they should just be popping him on the card. No Contender Series, none of this dumb shit. Just get him there. You just have to look at his walkout last night. Like, his aura and just the stardom around Paul Hughes is tangible, man. Like, you can almost feel that shit. When the music plays, you know, Grace, he walked out to Grace and then also walked out to Nipsey Hussle just after that, as he always does. And the look in his eyes, the way that he can just get a crowd to go silent, right? And then, you know, people sing along, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's something about Hughes that, and people will think like, oh, he's an Irish fighter, Irish fans get behind their fighters, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, I saw Paul Hughes in London against Vucenic, and that man knows how to fucking captivate a crowd. So it's to me, it's utter insanity. He's not signed to the UFC. Walkout, amazing. This was actually the first time we were seeing him since that Vucenic fight, like I mentioned, and that was Performance of the Year for me. Relinquished his belt. A little bit about Liasse here before we get into the nitty-gritty of the fight. Like, 15 pro fights, never seen a judge's scorecard, and he hasn't again. Like, he was coming off 3 consecutive knockouts since returning to Cage Warriors in 2022, and I feel bad for the guy because it was simultaneously like a setup and also a potential for something amazing. Because if Liasse had come in here and battered Paul Hughes, then this guy could not be denied a shot at gold. Now he's got to rebuild, and I have no doubt in my mind that this guy can rebuild. I have no doubt in my mind he can go knock out a few more people and be right back to the path that he's on. He was on before this fight, but it's the rebuilding phase where that takes a lot of mental fortitude, and it'll be interesting to see if Cohagans can bounce back. I think he will, but I'm interested to see that journey unfold. Sometimes you watch MMA and you become like an armchair psychologist, right? We all do it, and there were a few moments, that this fight only lasted a few minutes of the first round, so there's not a crazy amount to talk about within the fight, but there were enough interesting things in there to make me kind of take a step back and think about what's happening. And early on, like, Paul Hughes lands a couple of calf kicks, and it seemed to be causing Cohagans like some footwork issues because he kept stumbling a bit and he wasn't planting himself comfortably like on his feet. And I don't know if there was like a nervousness or if it was really that Paul Hughes was catching him in the middle of movement, but it didn't feel that way. So I don't know if there was like some nerves there from Cohagans, behind enemy lines. You're obviously not the guy people are picking to win this fight. So I don't know if there was something there mentally from his perspective, but the calf kicks from Hughes were huge. They were huge because they allowed him to press forward. They allowed him to really get a gauge on Cohagans, like the range and everything. Like he really had a good grasp on the fight early. And what I liked about Cohagans was that he was using his stumbling and his buckling to get off some nice teeps, and they were really working on Hughes. But it's Hughes' pressure fighting, which he's Paul Hughes can be a bit of a bruiser, and I don't think he gets enough credit for it because he's so technically sound. People don't really realise that he can do the dirty stuff as well. But it weirdly, it's off the back foot that he gets this knockout, which makes it so like aesthetically pleasing, right? Like it's such a nice watch. Unless you're Cohagans, of course, and Cohagans' team, like it's a great watch because Cohagans presses forward, tries to get like a straight right hand off, and then it's the check left hook from Paul Hughes, face plants Cohagans, which insane to do that to a guy like Cohagans. The follow-up shots were enough to get Mark Goddard to step in and stop the fight. There was a bit of protest from Cohagans, but for me, and I think for a large majority of people watching, it was a good stoppage. Visually, if a guy falls on his face, the referee's already going to get pretty hesitant, pretty skippy, and then he's landing a few shots on the ground as well. Just felt like if Goddard hadn't stopped it, it would have just been more of the same for a few more seconds, and there's no need for a guy to take that amount of damage when he's clearly already been face planted. Again, massive risk for Cohagans to take this. Props to him for taking it. Huge risk as well for Hughes to take it, and he looks all the better for it. Like, this guy cannot be denied. Do I want to see George Hardwick and Paul Hughes? Hell yeah, I do. Like, I don't think there's a fight I want to see more. And you throw Mason Jones in the mix as well. Would I want to see Paul Hughes, Mason Jones? Would I see Hardwick, Mason Jones? There's so many cool fucking fights at 155 pounds, but the selfishness, inside of me wants to see Hardwick Hughes because I want to talk about it on this pod. But I would love to see Paul Hughes go to the UFC. I don't know what we're waiting for. I don't know what the UFC are waiting on. He's young. He's got a great record, title pedigree, a whole backing of a country behind him, fights out of a great gym, is an excellent fighter on the feet or on the ground. I don't know. Just seems like they're fumbling the bag on this one. Paul Hughes, hats off to him. Impeccable performance. And in the co-main event, we had Mason Jones versus Yann Liasse. Yann Liasse, of course, the man who last fought George Hardwick for the title at Cage Warriors 152 in April, I want to say. Back in action, taking no breaks or any easy fights. Picks up a fight against Mason Jones, and it's Mason Jones's second appearance this year in Cage Warriors, second fight in 3 months, and this, the Ribeiro fight that Mason Jones had, we know what that was. That was, let's get this guy a win, let's get him back in the organization, because Ribeiro was pants, for lack of a nicer term. But Yann Liasse is no mug, and I've been trying to tell people this since the Hardwick fight, since before the Hardwick fight when it got booked. This guy is no mug, and Mason Jones treated him like one boy, because what Mason Jones did to Yann Liasse in this fight was just an absolute clobbering of the highest order, and just textbook Mason Jones. Like, if I had to ask someone to tell me, just in an ideal world, how does a Mason Jones fight go? And you're going to tell me, okay, he's going to get hit early on, he's going to close the distance, he's going to get into clinch, he's going to get into these nasty, close range battles, and he's just going to wilt the guy down, break him. He's probably going to take him down at some point, and he's going to beat on him on the ground or submit him. And that's in your mind as an MMA fan, as someone who knows Mason Jones fights, that's what you would say is the thing. This is what's going to happen. And it's exactly what happened, because round one, Yann Liasse really comfortable off the back foot, nice kicking game, and landed a few really good punches on Mason Jones, it has to be said. A few nice straight shots. You could see Mason's face after the fight didn't look anywhere near bad, but you can see he had a couple of bruises. He had a little cut near one of his eyes. So it's, Liasse did get a few digs in, but that's the Mason Jones experience, right? Like, he takes all of that punishment because he can, and what does he do? Goes straight into clinch distance. And when he gets you in that area, when he's able to unleash his dirty boxing, when he's able to start elbowing and landing those short uppercuts, this is when Mason Jones is just absolutely electric, right? And it took him a while within the round. It was very close until the last minute and a half, and you could have given the round either way. But there's a couple of knees to the body from Jones that really start to soften Liasse up. And out in the open, don't get me wrong, Liasse looked like the more impactful striker. But in that first round, the knees to the body towards the end, that's when we started to see a shift in momentum, and we started to see a shift towards Mason Jones. And I scored it 10-9 for him, and I thought Liasse is still in this, but it felt very much like Mason Jones has laid his traps, and now he's ready to kind of benefit from what he set up in that first round. In round two, I mean, this is Mason Jones, the bully, right? Like, the guy's a proper bully, and I always say this. And in this second round, it's the left hook, the right hand, the uppercut. He's really, really putting a pace on Liasse. Liasse is bleeding profusely over the canvas. Jones takes him down, beats on him a bit more. Goddard gets a few warnings in there, doesn't stop the fight, and then they return back to their feet. Another uppercut from Mason Jones. To me, halfway through this second round, Liasse just looked absolutely broken and devoid of ideas on the feet or on the ground. He was simply just in survival mode and just trying to survive the round, right? I love the Dagestani handcuff from Mason Jones. We saw a couple of good uses of the Dagestani handcuff on this card, but he used it well here just to pound away at Liasse. Again, Goddard warning, not really stepping in. That sounds like I'm blaming Goddard. I'm not. I think he officiated this fight well. Liasse was moving. He was keeping himself active, and you have to respect that. Even if a guy's getting beat on, if he's moving and he's not showing signs of quitting, or he's not showing signs of no longer being able to intelligently defend himself, then you have to keep the fight going, even if it's very much one-sided. Jones eventually takes the back, tries to get the rear naked choke in, but Liasse defends it, and then Jones is just like, cool, fuck it, whatever. Elbow, punches on the ground. I mentioned Mark Goddard. I meant to say Rich Mitchell. So it was Rich Mitchell who was officiating that one, so my bad. And he's the one who steps in. It's a great stoppage in my opinion, because at that moment, that's when it looks like Liasse is done. Like, he's totally done. I feel for Liasse a little, it has to be said, because I don't think people properly appreciate how good a fighter he is. Like, having to take on Hardwick and Mason Jones back to back is rotten luck, really. And I really hope he gets another crack at Cage Warriors, and against lesser names, big names, lesser opposition, just to build his confidence up a bit, because having to fight Hardwick and Jones back to back, that's mad, right? Like, you've got to have a death wish to do that, and he's done it, and I think he should be rewarded at least with another fight, just to see where he's at. Like, how can we gauge his talent in a normal setting? Because you've given him a guy who is one of the best fighters in the UK in George Hardwick and should be in the UFC, irrespective of what happened on the Contender Series. And then you've given him a guy in Mason Jones who is a two-weight champion in Cage Warriors, and also is now 10-0 in the organization. Guy's never lost in the yellow gloves. He's one of the greatest Cage Warriors fighters we've ever seen. Anyone who disagrees with that hasn't been watching long enough or hasn't watched enough. Mason Jones is just an absolute bully, and he's an incredible fighter on his feet, on the ground. He's entertaining and he's smart. Like, that's a very hard mix to have. Like, this guy is going to go there and he's just going to walk you down, and he's going to take an immense amount of punishment just to be able to hit you a couple more times than you've hit him. It's you know, his style is certainly a crowd pleaser, but you know that the technical side is there. The way he's able to mix things up, the way he's able to diversify his striking at different ranges, right? Whether it's in the clinch, close range, long range, you know, fighting off the back foot. He's able to mix that up really well. The wrestling is always there for him. The submissions are always there for him. Mason Jones is just an exceptional fighter, and it will be interesting to see how things shake out at 155 pounds. In an ideal world, you know, Hughes goes up. Not goes up. He's already gone up. In an ideal world, Hughes goes to the UFC and Mason gets his shot against Hardwick. I think Mason Jones and George Hardwick would be... I can't... In my head, I can't even think about that fight without getting like a million competing ideas in my brain about how that one will go and who's going to have the upper hand. But Mason Jones just treated Yann Liasse like he was just some scrub, and Yann Liasse is not that. So yeah, if you fought Mason Jones, his confidence wasn't there after, you know, his stint in the UFC and things not going as well for him as he would have hoped. Think again. Like, this guy he's here, and he's here to stay, and he's here to get his path back to the UFC without a doubt. Elsewhere on the card, we had Ryan Shelley versus Geordie Backers. This was a pretty interesting fight because we had effectively what was, for me, I think, you know, looking at the card, probably the biggest shock on the card. I don't know, you know, I don't want to go too far ahead, but for me, I thought, you know, I'm a big Ryan Shelley guy, I'm a big Adam Shelley guy. I think those two, the way that they strike with the Taekwondo background, the way they're able to mix it up, very, very impressive fighters. And I thought Shelley, you know, 6-1, coming off his loss against Harilla in his hometown, he's going to have a lot to prove, and he's going to be kind of emboldened by the atmosphere. And then Geordie Backs, like, this is the, you know, the first fight of his in 2023, his second Cage Warriors fight in total. His previous fight was against Antonio Sheldon, which is an absolute barn burner, and that ended as a split draw, I believe. It's definitely a draw, but I think it was a split draw. And I wasn't giving Backers a lot of credit coming into this fight, or I wasn't giving him enough. I wasn't backing him, really. I thought this was Shelley's fight to lose, and, you know, for a round, for I guess almost 2 rounds, Ryan Shelley looked like that guy. He was the first one to shoot, which took me by surprise a little bit, because I thought if anyone's going to wrestle here, it's going to be Backers. And I think it was one of those where he's trying to mix things up and keep Backers on his heels. And obviously Backers stuffed it, and you wanted this one to just stay standing for the sake of the audience, of the fans from an entertainment perspective. There was a clean 1-2 down the pipe for Shelley early in the first round. Buckled Backers with a calf kick as well on the follow-up. But what I liked about Backers was he wasn't here to get into a striking battle. He knew what he wanted to do, and he knew where the fight would be won. There's an excellent mat return halfway through the round that Backers has to get Shelley down. He throws a few strikes to the back of the head, which gets the fight and his momentum interrupted. He only got a warning, but it was enough to kind of interrupt things. And the fight obviously returned to his feet. And when it returned to his feet, I was seeing Ryan Shelley land every straight shot, straight right hand, the jab, like anything through the middle, he was landing. Bacchus was refusing to move his head off the centre line, which as a grappler is weird because you want to do that. You want to be elusive. You want to get the guy down and you know, shoot from the outside and get them to the ground. But I tweeted this, right? Like, I tweeted this as the round ended. I said, Ryan Shelley's made all the reads that he'll need for the rest of this fight. Every single straight shot is landing. Bacchus is refusing to move his head off the centre line. Shelley is setting up the head kick, and it feels almost inevitable that he'll find the kill shot. And this is why you shouldn't follow me, because I'm a fucking idiot, right? Because round 2, Bacchus gets the takedown early, which felt like the smartest thing to do in my opinion. Shelley did get back to his feet about a minute later, but it was enough kind of grinding from Bacchus to show that he's got a path to victory in this fight. Shelley feinted the jab a few times just to draw the reaction out of Bacchus, but he needed to start throwing a bit more because I think at this point he was concerned about being taken down and he didn't have that fluidity anymore. And the finishing sequence is incredible from Bacchus because he starts pressing Shelley against the fence. Shelley reverses the position in the body lock and it tries to trip Bacchus down, but Bacchus counters the throw. As they fall, you can see that Ryan Shelley's head takes a massive kind of walloping off the canvas, and I don't know if he was out from that, like not out, but if he was just dazed from that, because the way that Bacchus gets the head and arm choke, Ryan Shelley's defenseless. He's not trying to defend it, and he taps super quickly because the squeeze was so tight from Bacchus. Obviously, it was electric from Bacchus. I was so impressed with this performance. I think he's someone that could have a real run at featherweight. Just seems like such a balanced and well organized 145 pounder. Just took his path to victory here. Didn't bother trying to play the game that Shelley wanted to play. I wonder how much Shelley smacking his head off the canvas really discombobulated him, for like a lack of a better term. Either way, it's the countering of the throw that gets to this finishing sequence, right? And I think Bacchus did really well there. Bit of a weird fight from Ryan Shelley. That's 2 losses on the trot now. I wonder if, you know, if he just takes some time out, comes back in 6 months to a year and tries to evolve his game a little bit, because this guy's he's a real talent, he's a real prospect, and you know, it's unfortunate how he's lost this fight here, and obviously the Harilla fight as well. Like, this back-to-back finishes, and you know, credit to Geordie Bacchus. I think, like I said, he's going to be someone to watch at 145 pounds. Doesn't shy away from a barn burner, but he clearly has an ace up his sleeve with his grappling. We then had James Sheehan versus Ollie Santalati. James Sheehan, obviously, Jimbo Slice. I'm not going to lie, this fight wasn't incredibly exciting, but Sheehan's back in action after his decision loss to Oban. He'd been on a 5-fight win streak, and his only losses in his career are to Bonner, Ian Gary, and Oban Elliott. So, you know, these are big names, and this guy's fought a murderer's row already at welterweight. And in Santalati, we had a guy who was not making his Cage Warriors debut, but making his return to the promotion, because it had been 4 years since he last fought in Cage Warriors. The most experienced fighter that Jimbo Slice has fought, a near 20-fight veteran. So this was, you know, a tricky fight for Sheehan, because it's someone who's seen it all in MMA, who's done a lot with his career on the European circuit. He's fought in Brave as well, so Santalati's no mug here. And I think Sheehan did a great job popping his jab early, countering the takedown attempts, which was great. He got this really nice trip takedown on Santalati in the first round. Almost got guillotined in that sequence, but defended well, popped his head out, though it looked tight there for a second. Had it 10-9 Jimbo Slice in the first round. Round 2, it's the early calf kick approach from Sheehan, which I liked. Santalati tried a spinning elbow, got himself taken down, and you could see that he was starting to wilt a little bit, quite tired from having to defend against Sheehan. Sheehan's ground and pound was just putting points on the board. It wasn't like he was doing an incredible amount, but what Sheehan started to do is cool, you're not gonna give me your head to punch at. I'm just gonna start smacking your body up on the ground. So on the ground, he got a nice knee to the body on the ground, got a bunch of, had him stacked against the fence, was just hooking away at his body. And then the last 30 seconds of round 2, they returned to their feet, some nice lead hooks to the body from Sheehan. Santalati just looked super fatigued at that point. 2018, going into round 3. Round 3, more of the same, powerful 1-2 from Sheehan. Santalati shooting out of fatigue or desperation, you name it, whichever one. Looked like a bit of both to me, really. Sheehan got a bit adventurous, I'd say, trying to set up an armbar. Ended up on bottom with Santalati on top, obviously. But the round itself ended with Sheehan getting a few nice knees to the body and a switch kick as well. For me, it was a very, very comfortable 30-27 for the Dubliner. Nice to see him getting back to winning ways. Again, not the most entertaining Sheehan fight, which, if you've seen him fight, he has quite a few of them, so he's entitled to have one of these. But a very impressive performance because it was calculated, it was smart, and it was against a guy who has a big pedigree in Europe of being a grinder and being someone who knows how to finish fights and how to, manipulate a scorecard. He knows how to do all the right things with the criteria, right? So I think Sheehan had a tough opponent, and he did really well to just keep a lid on him and chip away at him as well. We then had the what I like to call the people's main event, which was Leon Hill versus Ieuan Davies. This, for me, the minute they booked this fight on very short notice, I was super, super excited. This was done on less than a week's notice, I believe. Leon Hill here moving up in weight class, despite being a legit contender at 155 pounds, like he's there or thereabouts, and moves up to take on Ieuan Davies, which is a very, very interesting thing to do. Davies coming off a rapid gilly against Deck Dean in April, which is still for me one of my favourite finishes of the year. This was Leon Hill's third fight of 2023 on a 6-fight win streak, all finishes. Both of these guys, it was like you knew something was going to happen in round 1. Like, this was not going to get out of round 1, and if it was, it would have been a barn burner in round 2 and in round 3, because this was never going to be dull, is what I'm trying to say. And what we got was Leon Hill body lock takedown early, had no fear or no kind of qualms with tangling up with a crafty grappler in Ieuan Davies. But what I liked here was Davies looked good on the feet, not as refined as Hill, but he was catching him with a bunch of right hands. Calf kick was really good as well. But there was a weird moment where he lands a calf kick and falls over, which messed with his momentum a little bit. But Hill was keeping his hands down. He wasn't really having a high guard. And I love the roundhouse from Davies right under the elbow of Hill. He was giving Hill a lot of trouble on the feet, which I was surprised by. But then there was a moment where they clinched. Nice dirty uppercuts from Hill, really good in close range. And you just knew this one's going to end soon. And this is where the finish came. And this is where Ieuan Davies is just, to call him a wizard is an understatement on the ground. Like, this guy is something else on the ground, because he prods to the body, slips again. So that was a second slip in the fight off a kick. I don't know if there was an issue with the canvas or he was just struggling with his feet, but he prods to the body and slips. Leon Hill, he will regret this, and something his team will look at as a moment that could have been avoided, because Davies slips and Hill just follows him straight to the ground. And to do that against a crafty, savvy, dangerous submission specialist in Ieuan Davies, like, we just saw him lock up one of the fastest guillotines I've ever seen in my life back in April. And what did he do here? Within, I promise you guys, like, go back and watch it, within like a second of Hill following him to the ground, Davies has him in a triangle armbar, and Leon Hill taps. It's so quick, it's so incisive. Ieuan Davies is a problem, man. Like, I don't know how much more I can say it on this pod. Like, this guy, he's now 4-0, all first round finishes, 3 submissions, one TKO. This guy on the ground is insane. Like, he's very, very, very good. And Leon Hill is no mug, man. Like, you've heard me talk about him on this pod for ages. Leon Hill is still a contender at £155. I'm sure he'll come back and he'll be just as good, if not better, than he's been. But ballsy to take this fight against Ieuan Davies upper weight class. Credit to him, because it was, for me, the most exciting fight on the card. Before the card started, like, that was the one I was most looking forward to. Ieuan Davies is just straight up problem. One of the most exciting welterweights on the Cage Warriors roster, and I think that, give him a few more fights, this guy we could be chatting about him in title contention. I really do think so, because that kind of game changer that he has in his submission grappling, there aren't many guys at 170 pounds that have that. We then had Paddy McCorry versus Samir Kaddi, which was supposed to be the prelim headliner, but was bumped to the main card because a bunch of fights had gone to a decision on the prelims. So, this stuff happens, just scheduling. They put him in, or they put the fight, they bumped the fight up, is what I'm trying to say. Very interesting fight with an incredible finishing sequence. Samir Kaddi, almost 2 years since we last saw him in action, was booked for a couple of fights here and there, but last time we'd seen him was him knocking out Chamu back in 2021. Paddy McCorry, obviously, we've seen him a lot more recently because he's got one of the knockouts of the year. It's on my shortlist for knockout of the year. His flying knee over Angus Hewitt back at Cage Warriors 153 in Dublin. So back in Dublin now, and an opportunity for him to kind of, further cement his name in the MMA scene, because obviously in Ireland he's a big fighter, but to everyone else in the world, people are still kind of clocking onto this guy, and it wasn't easy for him at all. It was not easy for Paddy McCorry, and I thought it might be, but Samir Kaddi came into this fight and he had different ideas. I loved the question mark kick from McCorry. I loved the head kicks. Like, he was clearly finding his spots there with the kicks, but Kaddi, once he got McCorry to the ground in round one, just really started to chip away at him. Even slapped him a few times on the ground, which might have been why McCorry flipped him the bird, or the double bird, really, multiple times at the end of the fight. But slapped McCorry a few times on the ground, was landing some really good strikes, but a lot of them were to the back of the head, and Mark Goddard, being Mark Goddard, just jumped in there, pulled Kaddi off McCorry, and gave him a stern warning, and then got really angry while giving him a warning, and just decided he was going to take a point, which I don't disagree with. He had warned Kaddi a few times, like in the midst of those striking sequences on the ground. But yeah, Kaddi had a point deducted. I still thought he won the round, so it was a weird one. I had it 9-9. There was a really cool, for all my judokas there's a really nice haragoshi here from Kaddi to counter a takedown attempt from McCorry, which was really nice. But I had it 9-9, like I said, at the end of round one, which is interesting because you get a point deducted off Kaddi, but I still thought he won the round. Obviously didn't win the round, but I still thought that McCorry hadn't won it himself. So 9-9 going into the second round. Second round was more of the same. McCorry tried to jump Gilly and, fell onto his back. Kaddi wriggled out and controlled him on the ground. Then McCorry attacked the inside heel hook. Kaddi managed to, get his own heel hook and bailed on it and ended up on top, returned back to half guard and did more work on the ground. I wouldn't say he was cruising to victory, because McCorry is dangerous everywhere, and we're about to talk about that in round 3. But I had it 19-18 for Kaddi going into the third round. And it's in that third round where things get really interesting, because McCorry lands a really nice head kick. Kaddi, takes him, puts him up against the fence as we'd seen all fight. McCorry again tries to jump the high elbow Gilly, pulls guard, and Kaddi pops out, and he's on top with 4 minutes and 20 seconds of the round left. And I just thought, cool, he's going to stay in this position and McCorry's going to lose a decision despite the point deduction. But what I loved is that McCorry managed to get back to his feet. Kaddi tried to hold him against the fence again, and McCorry this time jumped gilly again for like the third time, jumped the guillotine, high elbow, and this time Caddy was not getting out, forced the tap out of the Frenchman, gave him the middle fingers immediately, like laughing, giving him the middle fingers. Caddy protested, saying that it wasn't a tap, which, you know, in real time it looked like a tap, and Goddard did a great job seeing it, and this is, to me, why he's the gold standard for referees. You saw the tap, and on the replay it's clear as day. Taps twice, open hand, he's not striking, it's literally to the thigh, 2 taps, and that was it. Paddy McCorry needed that finish, in my opinion, because Caddy was winning up until that point. But it's an incredible finish, jumping guillotine, which I always love to see. Did it 3 times, if at first you don't succeed, right? Like, what an incredible finish for Paddy with his back against the wall. His confidence is unrivaled. Those times where he jumped guillotine, those times where he went for heel hooks, those are why he was losing the fight. Like, he was giving up advantageous positions, giving himself, ending up on his back, and you know, not being able to fight his fight. Like, he wants to be on the feet. But that's why he's the fighter and we're not, because that confidence is what wins him the fight in the end. Almost cost him the fight, but wins it at the end. He's such a prolific finisher. I think this was a fight to, you know, we've seen him demolish people. We've now seen him face some adversity. Whether he's flying through a fight or whether he's getting some adversity, like I'm saying, there's always a way that it goes for Paddy, and it's almost always with a finish. So a guy to really keep an eye on at middleweight. Really exciting, really confident guy. Great celebrations at the end. Can't wait to see Paddy McCorry fight again. And then we move on to the prelim section of the card, which had some really exciting fights. Takamandu versus Alexander Sasha Pirev was not one of those, unfortunately. I thought Takamandu did a good job. It wasn't his most inspired performance, but he fought incredibly smart, has back-to-back Cage Warriors wins. But, you know, with such a big reach advantage, and with Alexander Sasha Pirev not having the sharpest fight IQ on the feet, I really thought that Takamandu was going to expose it more. In the first round, he was jabbing to the body really nicely and really backing Pirev up. But what kind of, you know, made this fight a bit dull was that Takamandu was stalking him around the cage. He was only throwing singular shots. One. He wasn't throwing in combination, and it was letting Pirev reset. It was letting Pirev move around without the fear of getting knocked out, right? So a great snipey type performance from Takamandu, I will say, but not his most exciting, not a crazy amount to talk about. I scored it 30-27 for him. If you'd given Pirev another 15 minutes, he still wouldn't have been able to get hands on Mandu. I think Takamandu, defensively great. He controlled this fight. He dominated this fight. But I feel like if he'd thrown in combination a few times at least, he might have been able to get the finish, or at least make this a more exciting affair. But he got the win. He got his job done. Props to him. I'm sure we'll see him again very soon. Alexander Sasha Pirev, don't know if we'll see him again. Was clobbered by Dan Deutsch earlier in the year and handily dominated here. I don't know if he's someone we will see again in Cage Warriors. Maybe they'll throw him on like a Rome card or something. We then had Jer Harris versus Ryan Hewitt, which was probably the best fight on the prelims. Jer Harris making his Cage Warriors debut. Long amateur career on the Cage Warriors circuit, but also on the IMAF scene as well. So this is proper like professional Cage Warriors debut. Ryan Hewitt, on the other hand, was fantastic in his debut against Ander Sanchez, but lost the fight. He was really dog-walking Sanchez until submitting to like a Hail Mary heel hook towards the end of round 2. But in this fight, it was just 15 minutes of just like a back and forth war between these two. It wasn't Luke Riley versus Alexander Luff, but what is, really? I don't think anything is. But it was very exciting. I loved, Jer Harris showing that he could do it on the ground, he can do it on the feet. Took Hewitt down very early in round 1. On the feet, was clobbering Hewitt with like really nice 1-2s, a clean left hand. Like, this guy's got a left hand that's an absolute peach of a thing. So comfortable on the feet. Uppercuts as well while flurrying. Hewitt seemed in danger, like, through the middle part of through the middle part of round one. But what I think Hewitt did was he's a grinder, right? He's got a great chin, and that's just the type of fighter he is. So he stayed in Harris's face, landed some really nice left hooks towards the end of the round, which was against the momentum of the fight, and it startled Harris. Harris had a nice spinning elbow off the break and then just wouldn't stop spinning for the rest of the fight, which was hilarious. 10-9 Harris in the first round, but he was playing with fire because Hewitt is a dangerous man. And play with fire he would continue to do for the entirety of the fight, and that's what made it so interesting and so entertaining. Harris landed in the second round one of the cleanest head kicks you'll see, and Hewitt barely moved. This guy's got a crazy chin, and I think it's just one of those fights for Harris where it's like, what do I have to do to knock this man out? Because he's landing really good roundhouses to the body. He's hitting him with another spinning elbow. He's getting him on the ground, getting the Dagestani handcuff, manoeuvring to the back, trying to choke him out. Hewitt not giving his neck up. And then again, towards the end of the round, Hewitt with some really good uppercuts, really quick hands as well. And I will say, despite losing this fight, Ryan Hewitt's got some really underrated boxing and some really underrated hands. But Jer Harris had him 2018, at the end of round 2. Thought he did more than enough, landed the more impactful shots. Hewitt, what made this fight entertaining was that Hewitt was just walking forward with reckless abandon, but he wasn't really putting hands on Harris outside of a few, specific moments at the end of each round. Round 3, Harris pushing the pace early, landing at ease on a bloody-nosed Hewitt, who was, again, showing zero signs of backing down. There's a point where they get into a clinch and they're just trading elbows in the clinch, which was mental. Just such a cracking fight. Hewitt riding on pure toughness, Harris just clocking up the strikes over and over. It's a really fun scrap. If you're going to go back and watch a fight on this card for 15 minutes of straight up entertainment, this is the one. Had it 30-27, Jer Harris. Props to Hewitt for hanging in there for 15 minutes and giving as good as he got in spurts. But there's never a dull fight at flyweight. Harris hits hard for a 25er, and Hewitt's always going to be entertaining. I'm sure we'll see him quite a few more times in the yellow gloves, but Harris could do some really interesting things at 125 pounds. We then had Sean Clancy Jr. versus Milton Afonso Cabral. Milton obviously coming back from his really dull, disappointing fight with Kadim Dia earlier in the year. But he was actually shortlisted for Finish of the Year in 2022 on the Yellow Gloves pod with a head kick knockout at Cage Warriors 147, which was just a brutal thing. But the real star of this fight, and the one that, for me, I drew up a list of fighters I was most excited to see on this card, and in the top 3 was Sean Clancy Jr. It's a well-touted amateur career, 8-1 as an amateur, 2-0 as a pro, 2 first-round finishes, just 20 years of age. This guy is serious trouble for a lot of welterweights, and I don't think people are ready for this. Like, Sean Clancy Jr. is coming. Just to give a kind of a snapshot of how this went, because it didn't last very long. Clancy was sharp early, evading a couple calf kicks from Cabral, then landing some himself. Clancy shooting on Cabral was just the smartest thing to do. Landed straight in top position, got the handcuff, landing strikes. Cabral was straight up in no man's land. Clancy used that top pressure to force Cabral, to kind of move, and Cabral was trying to defend, but in doing so, gave up his back, and Clancy had the body lock in with 2.5 minutes to go, back up against the fence, perfect position. Cabral tried to turn at one point, and it was a big mistake in doing so. Clancy got the rear naked choke, which was more of a neck crank, actually, and when they showed a replay, it kind of looks like a neck crank, and it drew the tap out of Cabral. 3 minutes into round 1, Sean Clancy Jr. just straight up light work. Keep an eye on this guy. He's a serious problem on the ground, serious problem on the feet. 3-0 now with 3 first-round finishes. I'd love to see him get another fight in before the end of the year. Maybe on the Newcastle card. Maybe you put him on the card in December. Maybe he has a quick turnaround in Rome. Who knows? But yeah, this is the guy I'm super, super excited about. My personal pick for fight of the night was Solomon Simon versus Marco Sarasiavi. Anyone who knows me knows I love Sarasiavi. I just, in general, I love grapplers from Finland. I think they've got such a good pedigree out there, and they're really crafty, and they attack weird angles, and there's just something that they do that just endears me to them. And Solomon Simon, after his last fight, who's not going to be a fan, this was 2-0 versus 3-0. Two guys who debuted a week apart earlier in the year, both got finishes in their Cage Warriors debuts. This was a matchup of different styles, right? The grappler versus the striker, blah, blah, blah. It's just Taylor's oldest time in MMA. But it's always exciting when it's at this level. Just a really, really fun fight for me. I had high expectations for it. Did it deliver on those high expectations? Yes. I thought it would be more back and forth, like loads of grappling, loads of striking, and very, very high octane moments. It wasn't really, but there was enough kind of competing ideas from both guys that made the fight, for me, super interesting. Round one immediately showed where Sarasiavi wanted this fight to be, because he's shooting takedown attempts out in the open. He's not really setting them up. Solomon Simon stuffing them with ease. There's a brilliant, like, go back and watch round one. There's a brilliant trip takedown on Sarasiavi, and Simon lands in mount, which I thought, dangerous to mess about in these positions with a guy like Sarasiavi. Sarasiavi used a heel hook at one point to get back to his feet, and it's on the feet where this fight was won for the most part for Simon, because he's just so quick and he's so athletic. Like, the guy's a pure athlete. The jab that he throws is rapid. It's killer, right? Like, this guy throws such a clean jab, and every time Sarasiavi stepped into range, Simon would punish him. Sarasiavi tried to dive for a single leg, got stuffed, tried to dive for it again, got stuffed again. Big strikes on the ground towards the end of the first round for Solomon Simon. A few rocky moments where it looked like potentially the fight, was a few seconds away from being stopped. But 10-9 for Solomon Simon in round one. Just looked so sharp in this fight. Round two, more of the same from Simon. Calf kicks, Sarasiavi returning. Actually returns a calf kick to the back leg and buckles Simon. And this is what was very telling about this fight. I don't think Sarasiavi was bad at all. But what happens when there's such a big speed disparity between both guys is that no matter what you're trying to do, Solomon Simon is just, he's there, and he's gonna hit you before you hit him, and it's gonna fuck your momentum up, and it's gonna fuck your combinations up. And this is just the trouble of fighting a guy like Solomon Simon, who is, the guy's just a pure athlete. He's got great hands, quick hands, powerful hands, and he knows how to exploit his speed, and that's such a good talent to have in MMA, and a good awareness to have in MMA, because when you've got a speed advantage on the feet, obviously in grappling, someone can take you down, but even there, Solomon Simon is insane, because the way he gets his hips down so quickly, this guy is just so fun to watch. Everything is just quick twitch, mental, just seeing this guy. But Sarasiavi has some crafty ideas on the feet in this fight, like he really did, but just didn't have the speed to trade with Simon or to keep Simon honest. And Simon was just punishing every single level change. Straight left into the roundhouse kick was really nice in round two, but he was just racking up the strikes. And it was another round for Simon, 2018, going into round three. And this is where, with 11 seconds to go of the entire fight, Solomon Simon managed to pull off an exceptional submission. To submit a guy like Sarasiavi is insane, but the way he did it was brilliant. I'll save having to go through the whole of round three, because this happens right at the end, and it's more of the same in round three, so we don't really have to get into it. But there's a moment where Solomon Simon gets a standing head and arm choke, and just charges at Sarasiavi, has him in the head and arm choke, charges him all the way up to the fence, and then trucks him to the ground. But he doesn't let go of the head and arm choke. He takes him down in the same position that he had standing on the feet, keeps him in that position. You think, is there enough there? Is the pressure there? Sarasiavi gonna feel like a squeeze? Is he gonna tap? And then you see Simon start to drive his shoulder into the head and arm choke. And if you've ever grappled or you've been in a head and arm choke, you know that the minute you start to feel that shoulder pressure drive in, you're about to go to sleep, right? And Simon does exactly that, applies the pressure, gets the tap out of Sarasyavi with 11 seconds to go of round 3. One of the best performances on the card. Solomon Simon is no joke. Just to submit a guy like Sarasyavi, again, is no mean feat. That's a nasty career highlight if ever I've seen one. Solomon Simon he could do some really good things at 145 pounds. You know, I'm going to be straight up honest here. Like, with Irish fighters, with how big the Irish MMA media scene is, you never really know who's legit, who isn't, who's getting a bit more hype than he should because he's from a popular gym, or, you know, who's just a nice guy and people really like him. Is he a good fighter? Like, you never know, right? Like, with Irish MMA media, these guys are so fervent and so passionate about their scene, which I love, and it's great to follow. Severe MMA guys and all the people on the fringes on Twitter and everything. But with Solomon Simon, this is no hype job. This is no bad fighter here. This Solomon Simon's legit. Like, he's a really legit problem. He's now 3-0, all finishes. This guy could go right to the very top, because I think the way he fights, the speed at which he fights, the confidence on the ground, the confidence on the feet, just give me more Solomon Simon fights. And then we had the prelim opener, which is the final fight for us in this reaction pod, which was Nick Bagley versus Michael Quinn. Michael Quinn, this is his pro debut, mixed bag amateur career, fought for Cage Warriors on the AMI circuit, missed weight for this fight. I think it had been 4 years in the making, this professional debut. 4 years between his last amateur fight and this fight. And fighting Nick Bagley, of all people, is, you know, that's something you don't want to do. Nick Bagley, if you don't know, put on a clinic at Cage Warriors 150 back in March against Wesley Machado. You know you've put on a cracking card when you can afford to have him as your prelim opener. Not much to say about this one. Michael Quinn didn't have a single second of success in this fight. Well, I say that. He did get a really nice overhand on Nick Bagley, which forced Nick Bagley to shoot. And the minute Nick Bagley shot, he got Quinn down to the ground in round 1, dominated him with a few really nice elbows towards the end of the round. There were some good actions on the feet, actually. I'm kind of glossing over it, but Bagley had some digs to the body early, punch into the chest, punch into the midsection, clearly trying to get Quinn to drop his hands. But once Quinn landed that overhand, I don't think it rocked Bagley, but he saw an opportunity where this guy's up against the fence. He's probably, you know, a bit like excited about the fact that he's got hands on me. This is time to take him down, right? And yeah, round 1 was dominant, 10-9, Nick Bagley, like no qualms about that. Round 2 though, Bagley knew, immediately level change. He was like, if it's that easy to get this guy down, I'm going to go and do it again. Quinn threw like a really lazy calf kick, and yeah, Bagley punished it, got him down with 4 minutes and 50 seconds to work on the ground. And you knew this fight ain't going to last much longer. A minute later, brilliant back take from Bagley, locked in the rear naked choke, drew the quick tap from Quinn. Just easy work for Bagley. That's his 3rd career rear naked choke. Career rear naked choke. That's like a red lorry, yellow lorry situation. But anyways, 4-1 now as a pro. Powerful striker, exciting grappler. Really easy work for him. All of his finishes in his career are practically via submission. So yeah, Nick Bagley, another one to keep an eye on at 155 pounds. Michael Quinn, don't know what that was about. Maybe I need to read into it, but 4 years between your last AMI fight and your pro debut. I'm sure there's a story there, but just seemed like a setup fight for Nick Bagley, and he took it with both hands and got the finish. So you can't really blame a man for taking advantage of what's in front of him. So that was Cage Warriors 161 in the books. All in all, we had 6 submissions in 11 fights, and we had 2 TKOs, which were the last two fights of the card, which was Mason Jones and Paul Hughes. So lots of finishes, 11 fights, 9 finishes. The fights that went to a decision, one was really good, one was quite dull. All in all, this doubling card returned, in my opinion, really entertaining. I love the commentary decision to have Reza, Straussy and Brad Wharton on comms. Usually you only get Brad and +1, but it was good to have the three of them. I think you got some really good technical insight from Strauss on the ground, as you always do. Reza, obviously, top tier at just breaking down a fight, and Wharton, incredible at, painting a picture of the fight, getting you excited about a fight, and just being able to guide and carry those guys through the broadcast as well. A great card for Cage Warriors, really. Next up is the card in Rome, which will be Cage Warriors 162 on October 28th. Might look at doing a preview pod for that one. A lot of Italian talent, as you can imagine. I'm really excited for Simone Patrizzi versus Dimitri Gerlin. I think that's going to be mad. Michelangelo Lupoli versus Nicolas Leblon, like insane. Tanio Pagliariccio versus Sam Creasy. The list goes on, like Matteo Martignoni, which is Michele Martignoni's brother, making his Cage Warriors debut. Kadim Diaz back in action. But that's enough of me. You've been listening to me for quite a long time, so I'm going to leave it there. If you enjoyed the pod, like I always say, drop a like or comment, or give it a review. Tweet me, message me on Instagram. Always happy to discuss all things fighting. If you hate the pod, please let me know, because any press is good press, right? But generally, any feedback is always well encouraged and well received. And I guess that's pretty much it from me. Thank you for listening, and I will catch you all on the next one.